think Josh Freeman was forced on Leslie Frazier. And I think it's not fair to him to have to coach a football team out there under those conditions. He was not ready to play. All right? They did not have a chance to win that football game. And I believe that Josh is forced on him.
Oh, you think? Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's certainly out of Leslie's hands if that's the case.
If that's the case, now you've got an
yeah.
I mean, I don't
Leslie
know
Frazier's a good football coach.
I agree with that.
He knew nothing about Josh Freeman 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
All right? So what did Leslie see with his defensive eye that would tell him that, okay, yes. Now, Christian Ponder was hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But he had the ability, and watching Josh play that way, it's a huge indictment on Christian Ponder.
All right, we had to bring Ed Werder in for this because we are getting all sorts of conflicting reports this morning and really finger pointing. I mean, to be discussed this much after a loss. How did Josh Freeman get that starting gig? Whose decision effectively was it? And can you reiterate your report from earlier this morning?
Well, I asked how this decision was made as it was being made last week. And I was told at the time by people in the Vikings organization that this was strictly going to be a decision made by Leslie Frazier, that Rick Spielman, the general manager, decided to bring him in and look at Josh Freeman because they thought he had shown signs early in his career being potentially a franchise quarterback. But the way they're structured organizationally, Spielman brings in players with the consent of the coaches.
So he does get the consent of the coach.
Of course, everybody's
so
involved
Leslie
in that
Frazier
process.
signed off on this.
Yeah, he was equally interested. But the point here is that his job at this point in the season is to bring in and create the best 53-man roster there is, and then it's up to Leslie Frazier and his coaching staff to decide when those players are ready to play in a game and how they should be used in the game. So it's my understanding that while Leslie Frazier went to Spielman last week, or as this decision was being made to start Josh Freeman, he went to ownership and informed them that he was going to start him in this game, that it was ultimately his responsibility to decide Josh Freeman's role in that game last night.
And how would that have played had he said, you know what, I don't think this guy's ready?
I assume
after your GM brings him in.
I assume that at that point, Rick Spielman and the ownership would have supported that decision and recognized that they still had 10 more games after this one to evaluate Josh Freeman. And that's what this is all about now. And I asked a player about that last night after the game. I said, how do the veteran players feel about the organization obviously prioritizing evaluating quarterbacks over winning games? And he said, that's too sensitive an issue right now. We really want to win in the locker room.
Well, how are you going to win games unless you take a chance, right? Because they're not winning games with the quarterbacks that they have in-house. They bring this guy in. Don't they effectively have to see what he's made of?
Well, eventually. And I think going into this game, obviously, there was some practice time, and they felt like Josh Freeman would be able to run a limited offense. Now, a part of this has to do with the running game. If you can't run the football, it puts way too much pressure on Josh Freeman coming into a situation where he hasn't played on his football team. There's no connection with the receivers. And so it was very limited. You watched this last night. No motion, not a lot of shifts, not a lot of personnel. The passing was basic, but it was built on the run game. When they couldn't run the football, Josh Freeman went back 50-plus times to throw the ball. That's never good. And so this is why we're looking at this guy right now, and we're questioning, was Leslie Frazier a part of this?
I mean, Herman, he couldn't have looked this bad in practice.
That's what I'm saying.
How could he look like this and anyone make a conscious decision to start him in a football game?
Well, listen, no one looks bad in practice. When you practice, you're practicing plays that you think win. I mean, you don't practice plays that don't work. I mean, no coach sits out there and goes, well, let's run this play, by the way. It doesn't work. Let's play this player. He can't play. You practice because you have a game plan, and the game plan is structured off not only passing the ball, but running the ball.
16 overthrows? What do you attribute that to?
That's, to me, some of that was anxiety. Some of it was the fact that the receivers are trying to learn how this guy is throwing the football. A lot of things. But when you can't run the ball, Hannah, let me tell you something. And you got to go back 52 times, and you've only been in this offense for like 4 days, 5 days, you're not going to look very good.
But the Vikings, the last thing they want is finger pointing. You know, it was the coach's decision to start him. You brought him in. I mean, you don't want this kind of disconnect within an organization, do you?
No, it's not good, especially around the quarterback situation. And, Leslie Frazier is going to be evaluated for his own job at the end of the season. And losing on the road to the Giants with a quarterback who clearly was not prepared for the moment is an indictment of sorts on him that he's going to have to answer for eventually. And I would just point out that I think from the minute they signed Josh Freeman, it was clear they were going to play him because they wanted to know if he was going to be the answer at the end of the season. He's only signed through this season. And so they have to know at the end of the season. Now, you would think that it would be an important enough decision that they would want to create a positive foundation for him to start. And I think that's where the question mark is now. Did they fail to create that opportunity for him to succeed last night? And now they've compounded that because now they've got a short week, and what do you do now? Play him again on a short week, or go back to Christian Ponder and admit that what you did with Josh Freeman was a mistake?
I mean, is that a possibility? What would you do, Coach?
Well,
if you're in Leslie Frazier's shoes right now,
if you're in Leslie Frazier here again, I think you continue to go in this direction. But if he struggles early, you're going to have to bring the lefty in, get him out, bring some, because you're paid to win games. Those players want to win. As a head coach, you have to put your team in position to win games. And if he's struggling early again next week and he's starting, you bring the lefty in. You bring Ponder off the bench, say, hey, go in there and play.
Although, they'll tell you, I was told that this is not an indication that they've given up on Christian Ponder, that they still think that he has to improve and be a more consistent player, but they certainly were curious to see how he was going to respond competitively to Josh Freeman's presence. But they've really demonstrated no recent interest in playing Christian Ponder.
That sounds like what the Jets said when they brought in Tim Tebow. Let's see how Mark Sanchez reacts to his presence. It's not a very promising thing. The Vikings get the 4-2 Packers Sunday in prime time, winners of 3 in a row. Should be interesting. Thanks, gentlemen. Ed, Herm, we appreciate your time.
Thanks, Anna.
A lot of talk for a rough game, right?
Yeah.